The sun scorched the cobblestone streets of Serra Azul, a small town nestled between green hills in the interior of Rio Grande do Sul, 3 hours from Porto Alegre. Clara, 29, got off the bus with a light suitcase and a smile that hid more than it revealed. She was a woman of magnetic presence, with loose brown hair that danced in the wind and a light dress that hugged her curves effortlessly. Clara didn't follow rules. She lived for the moment, for the pulse of life that made her feel alive. But on that February afternoon, her heart beat with a mix of expectation and guilt. Clara had come to visit Mariana, her childhood friend, in the rustic house she shared with her father, So Antonio. Their friendship had stood the test of time. But Clara knew that this visit wasn't just about remembering old stories. There was something about Serra Azul that attracted her. Something forbidden that she didn't dare name. Mariana's house was on top of a hill, with windows that looked like eyes overlooking the valley. The smell of eucalyptus hung in the air, mixed with the distant sound of a stream. I would like to take a brief break to ask for your like and subscription to the channel. You are helping us a lot with this simple gesture, and I would like to know which city you watch us from. Clara, how I miss you. Mariana hugged her on the balcony, her eyes shining. I prepared that orange cake you love. You're an angel, Mari, Clara replied, but her gaze wandered to the figure that appeared at the door. Mr. Antonio, 52 years old, was a man with calloused hands and deep eyes, as if he carried the hills inside him. He greeted Clara with a shy wave, but his eyes lingered a second too long, and she felt a shiver. That night, while Mariana talked about life in the city, Clara found herself distracted. The porch, with its hammock swaying under the starry sky, seemed to call her. She felt the weight of desire, a dangerous game that was beginning to form. "It's hot today, right?" said Clara, fanning herself, her eyes meeting Antonio's for an instant. He just smiled, but the silence said it all. Guilt whispered in his ear, but desire spoke louder. How to resist what was already starting to burn? The night in Serra Azul was an invitation to secrecy, with the song of cicadas filling the silence, and the breeze carrying the sweet aroma of wildflowers. Clara, lying in the hammock on the porch, felt the heat of guilt and desire fighting a battle in her chest. Mariana, after a dinner filled with laughter and homemade wine, had gone up to her room, exhausted. "I sleep like a log after a day like that," she said, laughing, without noticing the sparkle in her friend's eyes. But Clara couldn't sleep. The balcony, with its view of the moonlit valley, seemed like a stage where something inevitable was about to happen. So Antonio appeared at the back door, holding a cup of black coffee, the steam rising like a veil between them. He was a man of few words, but every gesture carried intention. Clara noticed how he avoided looking at her directly, but his eyes betrayed the effort. "Beautiful night, isn't it so, Antonio?" asked Clara, her voice low, almost a whisper. She let the dress subtly slip off her shoulder, as if it were an accident. "Too much to sleep, right?" he replied, his voice hoarse, taking a slow sip of the coffee. His gaze finally met hers, and Clara felt the air grow thicker. The conflict was growing inside her. Mariana was his friend, almost a sister. Betraying her, even if just with thoughts, was like treading on sacred ground. But there was something about Antonio, the loneliness he carried, the weight of years without company since his wife left, that pulled her like a magnet. Clara got up from the hammock, walking to the balcony wall, where the moonlight drew, shadows on her skin. "You know, sometimes I feel him looking at me," said Clara, pretending lightness, but testing the limit. "The valley," I say. "It looks like it has life." Antonio laughed softly, approaching. "It's not just the valley that has eyes here." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She knew that every word took them deeper into a path of no return. An obstacle came when the sound of a window opening came from upstairs. "Mariana?" Clara froze, but Antonio just looked away, as if nothing had happened. The tension hovered, and Clara wondered how far she would go. "Do you want more coffee?" he asked, breaking the silence, but the invitation seemed to be for something bigger. Clara smiled, hesitantly. Maybe something stronger. Serra Azul's balcony seemed to pulse with a life of its own that night, the cicadas now silent, as if they knew something was about to change. Clara felt the weight of Antonio's gaze, every second stretching the rope between them until it almost broke. The cup of coffee he offered had been exchanged for a bottle of jabuticaba liqueur, and the sweet liquid burned in Clara's throat as she sat on the wall, her feet dangling in the air. Antonio was just a few steps away, closer than ever, the warmth of his presence almost tangible. "You know, Clara," he began, his deep voice cutting through the silence. "We spend our lives trying to do the right thing. But sometimes wrong is what makes us feel alive." The words hit Clara like a spark. She knew she was on the threshold of something dangerous, but desire blinded her. Then came the turning point. Instead of a touch or a kiss, as she almost expected, Antonio picked up an old battery radio from the table on the porch. With a click, ancient music filled the air, a slow, melancholic tango that seemed to echo from the hills. He reached out, his hand, his eyes fixed on hers. "Dance with me?" he asked, a challenge disguised as an invitation. Clara hesitated, her heart pounding. Dancing with him was crossing a line, but refusing was denying what was already burning inside her. She accepted, and when their hands touched, the world seemed to spin slower. The tango guided them, bodies close but without touching completely, a delicious torture. Clara could smell the scent of earth and wood coming from him, and every step was a silent confession. "This is crazy, Antonio," she whispered, her voice shaking as they spun around in the moonlight. "Madness is pretending we don't want this," he replied, his eyes shining with an intensity that made her shudder. The dance was interrupted by a muffled sound. The bottle of liquor fell from the wall, shattering on the floor. The noise echoed, and Clara felt a chill run down her spine. What if Mariana had heard? The possibility of being caught hit her like a shock, forcing her to face the gravity of what they were doing. But instead of retreating, she felt a new boldness rise. Dancing had changed everything. It wasn't just desire, but a connection she hadn't expected. "And now?" Clara asked, panting, the shards of glass shining at her feet. Antonio smiled, dangerously. "Now we decide how far we go." The shattering of the bottle still echoed in Clara's mind as she and Antonio faced each other on the balcony. The tango now just a memory on the silent radio. The sweet smell of the liquor mixed with the fresh air of Serra Azul, and the moon seemed to judge them with its cold shine. Clara felt the weight of the decision that hovered between them. Continuing was betraying Mariana. Retreating was denying something that had already transformed how she felt. For the first time, he realized that it wasn't just desire. There was a vulnerability in Antonio that made her question her own choices. "Antonio, this isn't just a dance, is it?" asked Clara, her voice almost breaking. She took a step away, leaning on the wall, her heart divided. He looked down, his calloused, hands gripping the railing. "No, Clara, it is not. But I'm Mariana's father. And you're her best friend. What are we doing here?" His honesty disarmed her. Clara had always lived for the moment, but now she faced a new adversary: conscience. She thought of Mariana, sleeping in the room above, oblivious to what was happening. She imagined her friend's face if she knew the pain it would cause. But she also saw Antonio, a man who, like her, seemed trapped in a life he didn't entirely choose. "I don't know how to stop wanting what I shouldn't," Clara confessed, her eyes teary. "But I don't want to hurt anyone." Antonio took a step forward, hesitantly. "So why does it feel like we're already hurting, even without doing anything?" The conversation was interrupted by a creak from upstairs. Clara froze, panic shooting up her spine. Was it Mariana? They looked at each other, motionless, until silence returned. The shock forced Clara to reflect. She couldn't erase the dance, the touch, what she felt. But I could choose what came next. "Tell me something," she asked more firmly. "If we stop now, will you hate me?" Antonio laughed sadly. "No, Clara. I think I'm going to hate myself for letting you go." The answer hit her like a punch. Clara realized that she needed to grow beyond impulse. For the first time, I wanted to be more than the woman who lived for the moment. She walked to the hammock, picking up the shawl she had left there. "Let's clean up these pieces," he said, pointing to the spilled liquor, "before someone cuts themselves." As they swept the windows, under the watchful eye of the stars, Clara made a difficult decision. Protect Mariana, even if it hurt. But inside her, a seed of change was sprouting. Perhaps she wanted something deeper, something that wouldn't destroy. Serra Azul's balcony was silent, except for the soft sound of Clara's broom sweeping up the shards of broken liquor. The air between her and Antonio was heavy, filled with unspoken words and contained desires. The full moon illuminated the valley, casting long shadows that seemed to dance as they had done minutes before. Clara felt her heart sinking. The decision to retreat was still burning, but Antonio's proximity tested her determination. Every look from him was a flame rekindling what she tried to put out. "Clara," said Antonio, stopping sweeping, his voice low as a secret. "Have you ever wanted something so much that it hurt not to have it, but it hurt even more to get it?" She looked up, surprised by his vulnerability. "Every day, Antonio. But sometimes what we want isn't worth what we lose." The tension was growing, as if the air itself was conspiring to unite them. Clara threw the pieces into the trash can, trying to anchor herself in the task, but Antonio took a step closer, the heat from his body almost palpable. The balcony, once a stage for seduction, was now a battleground between desire and duty. It was then that the climax broke, not with a touch, but with a revelation. "I'm not who you think," Antonio confessed, his eyes fixed on the ground. "After Mariana's mother died, I closed myself off. But you made me remember what it's like to want to live again. And that scares me." Clara felt the floor disappear. It wasn't just attraction. Antonio saw something in her that she herself did not recognize. a chance for redemption, to be more than impulses. But before he could respond, a noise came from the house. This time it wasn't a creak, but footsteps. Mariana appeared at the door, her eyes sleepy, holding a glass of water. "What's going on here?" he asked, frowning when he saw the two, so close, the balcony in disarray. Clara's heart stopped. Guilt swallowed her, but she acted quickly. "We spilled the liquor, Mari. Sorry for the noise. It's okay now." Mariana looked from Clara to her father, suspicious but nodded. "Okay, but you're going to sleep, right? It's late." When Mariana went up, Clara and Antonio looked at each other, the moment suspended. She knew they had a narrow escape, but his confession had changed everything. They couldn't go back, but they also couldn't move forward without destroying what they loved. Clara touched his arm briefly, a silent goodbye. "We stop here," he whispered, his voice firm despite the pain. Antonio nodded, his eyes shining. For her, the climax was not a surrender, but a renunciation. Dramatic, painful, but necessary. Clara felt the weight of the choice, but also a new strength, as if she had faced herself and won. The morning in Serra Azul dawned with a veil of mist covering the valley, as if nature itself wanted to erase the secrets of the previous night. Clara woke up in the hammock on the balcony, where she had spent the last few hours, unable to sleep in the guest room so close to Mariana and Antonio. The smell of fresh coffee came from the kitchen, mixed with the sound of birds that seemed to clear the weight in his chest. She stood up, her dress wrinkled, her hair messy, but with a new clarity in her eyes. The night's decision, renouncing her desire for loyalty, still hurt, but it also made her feel stronger. In the kitchen, Mariana set the table with cornbread and homemade jam, the usual smile on her face. "Good morning, sleepyhead. What did you dream about to look like that?" he joked, without noticing the turmoil that Clara was carrying. Clara laughed, a light sound that hid the storm within. "I dreamed of the valley, Mari. He won't leave me alone." Antonio entered carrying a jug of juice. His eyes met Clara's, for a moment, but there was no longer the fire from last night. Only a mutual understanding, a silent promise to respect what they had chosen. He poured the juice, hand steady, and sat in silence. Clara noticed a new wrinkle on his face, as if his resignation had left a mark. "Dad, it's quiet today," said Mariana, poking him. "What was it? The cicadas kept you awake?" Antonio smiled, a touch of sadness. "Just thinking about work, daughter. The hill doesn't wait." Clara felt a pang in her heart, but also relief. They had protected Mariana, preserved their friendship and family. Over coffee, they talked about simple things, the city festival, the stream that overflows in the rain. And Clara found herself cherishing those moments of true connection. The seduction of the night had been intense, but what remained was the choice for something greater: loyalty. Before leaving, Clara walked to the balcony wall, where the bottle had broken. He touched the rough stone, a reminder of what almost was. Antonio approached, keeping his distance. "You're going to come back, right?" he asked, his voice neutral, but with a hidden weight. "Of course," Clara replied, smiling. "But next time, I'll bring my own liquor." He laughed, and the sound warmed the air. When Clara hugged Mariana goodbye, she felt her eyes water. It wasn't just about leaving Serra Azul, but about leaving a part of himself that had learned to want more than the moment. On the bus, watching the hills disappear, Clara promised herself to carry that lesson. Desire can be a flame, but love, for a friend, for the right choices, is what lights the way. 6 months later, Serra Azul looked different under the golden August sky. The hills, now dotted with wildflowers, glowed with the promise of a new cycle. Clara got off the bus with the same light suitcase, but a different weight in her heart. She was no longer the impulsive woman who sought the heat of the moment. It carried a hard-won serenity, shaped by the night that almost changed everything. The visit to Mariana was no longer about testing limits, but about strengthening bonds that she had learned to value. The house on the hill was the same, with the porch that still held echoes of that dance under the moon. Mariana ran to hug her, her eyes full of news. "Clara, you won't believe it. The festival is bigger this year, and I convinced Dad to dance in the square." He laughed, pulling her inside. Clara smiled, but her gaze wandered to Antonio, who was sweeping the yard. He raised his head, and for a second time seemed to stop. There was no desire in his eyes, but a silent complicity, as if they shared a secret that no one else would understand. "Welcome back," he said simply, and went back to work. In the following days, Clara immersed herself in the life of Serra Azul. He helped Mariana decorate the bandstand for the festival, laughed with the neighbors, and even danced, but in the square, with children and friends, not on the balcony. Antonio maintained a respectful distance, but sometimes they exchanged short sentences, filled with an understanding that didn't need words. One night, while the festival lit up the valley with lanterns, Clara sat on the balcony wall, alone. Mariana was in the square, and Antonio was reading in the backyard. She looked up at the stars, remembering the broken bottle, the tango, the choice. He touched the pendant he now wore, a gift from Mariana, a stone flower that symbolized eternal friendship. He smiled, knowing he had chosen right. "Do you still think about that night?" asked Antonio, appearing in the dim light, his voice calm. Clara wasn't scared. "I think about what she taught me, that sometimes what we don't do is what makes us grow." He nodded, eyes on the valley. "You've changed, Clara, for the better." "You too," she replied sincerely. When Antonio returned home, Clara stayed there, the wind caressing her hair. Serra Azul was no longer a place of temptation, but a mirror of who she had become. Someone who knew how to love without destroying, who found beauty in renunciation. The hills seemed to whisper that she would always have a home there, not to repeat mistakes, but to live truths. With one last look at the sky, Clara kept the balcony in her heart and went down to the square, where Mariana was waiting for her, dancing under the lights. Life, he thought, was the dance we chose to continue. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help us and tell us where you watch us from.